Hey, I'm making my own way, but I stumble and I falter every day. But I love my baby now. But I love my baby, I'm still learning how. Hey, 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 I'm okay. Stay with me. We'll beat these
Hi, my name is Dan Fox. I'm with Boulder Psychological Services. We have a great show today. It's on how to reduce family conflict. I want to thank our sponsors. First, the Boulder Valley School District, providing us this wonderful space in their boardroom. We have Boulder Psychological Services, the Hope Coalition, Louisville Public Library, the Parent Engagement Network, the Daily Camera, Centennial Peaks Hospital, the Boulder County Healthy Use Alliance, the Boulder Counseling Cooperative, Temple Grandin School, the Mamie Dowd Eisenhower Public Library in Broomfield, and also the Boulder Public Library Foundation. So thanks to all of you. And we've got two excellent panelists with us today. Leslie Cunningham is a licensed professional counselor. She's got 25 years of experience working with all aspects of teen and family relationship hurdles, including couples discord, sibling complexities, divorce aftermath, and repairing the natural breaks occurring when people live together. Leslie is remembering what has worked and untangling relationship knots, and that goes a long way towards regaining family harmony. Stephen Woolhandler is a doctor of law and a licensed professional counselor. He's a psychotherapist, mediator, arbitrator, family evaluator, and parenting consultant. He's the founder of Creative Conflict Resolutions, a professional mediator with the Mediation Association of Colorado, previously directing the Boulder chapter, and a former member of the New Mexico State Bar Association's Alternative Dispute Resolution Committee. So we're very fortunate to have two outstanding panelists with us today. I'm going to kick off with one of the questions that I've been sort of wrestling with in my own family, which is conflict a normal part of family life? Or to put it another way, is healthy conflict possible? Leslie, why don't you start?
Well, Dan, of course it's possible, and it's also logical, because kids are naturally going to have some parts of things that just don't work for them. We're all human beings, and we all came out of a different shell, so we can't all be alike or even agree on things, and that therein lies the difficulty in families. We were given our families, we didn't choose them. So the problem with conflict is that it can be as destructive as it is instructive. But the instructive part, which is how the family is a laboratory for kids to learn about conflict and how to manage their emotions when they don't always agree with things, that's the important part of family conflict. And it starts as early as in the cradle, when children need to be listened to by their parents, when a parent tries to understand what's wrong and gives them feedback by picking them up, by giving them a bottle. It's an automatic response to their distress. So as children are distressed, parents graduate into more and more empathy toward a child's ability to understand, or the parent's ability to understand the child's distress. And as that grows between the parent and child, so does trust and attachment. So once a parent and child are attached, the ease of solving conflicts is much more available to both of them. So I would say as early as children can speak, they will have conflict and they need to be heard. So that's the first part, listening, interpreting when a child is saying, they're yelling. So you say, oh, you're in great distress about this, aren't you? And the child will go, oh, she gets it, I am in distress. Doesn't mean you say, yes, go ahead and run in the street, Johnny, but it means that you hear them. And once you hear them, the level of distress usually recedes. Then you have the opportunity to talk about solutions. But as long as the distress level is high, kids are very unlikely to be able to solve anything. So bringing that distress level down by understanding and then offer solutions. And in the end, you're the parent. So a lovely structure of ways that you work with your child that is predictable, a way that they know how you're going to respond and that, in fact, you are in control, gives a child a great deal of comfort in knowing you will not let this situation go out of control.
Thanks. Steve?
Well, Dan, in thinking about this, I've been thinking about this in terms of family conflict over the holidays. And my short answer is that is conflict a normal part of family life? Yes, yes, yes. It's a normal part of human interactions. And I mean, I think, I think Leslie addressed a lot of this very well, but what would I add? I would add that I worry more about families who claim to have no conflict than families who have conflict and are willing to look at it and talk about it. So yes, I think it is a normal part of family life, and I think it gets sometimes more heightened over the holidays for a number of reasons.
Okay. Boy, this is good for me because I think I'm more of like a conflict avoidance, keep the peace kind of thing. And I'm hearing from both of you that, it's really okay to see it as this learning opportunity. It's a normal thing, and I don't need to fear it. So why is it that we get into more conflict with family members than colleagues or acquaintances? Does that happen? That seems like that happens to me. Steve, what do you think?
This reminds me of a song that I believe it's recorded by many people, but the Mills Brothers back in, it might have been the 40s or 50s, recorded a song, You Always Hurt the Ones You Love. And I think this is because we actually feel, it's a sign that we feel safer with our family, the people that we're closest to. So we feel we can let it out there rather than if we're at work, I don't want to let it out with the boss because, it's not as safe for me to do that. So I think that's why sometimes you tend to find there's more conflict in a family, but that's not necessarily a negative thing.
Thanks.
Well, and also, Dan, the consequences are different in a family than they are within work. We might not come out so well at work if we display inappropriate behavior in conflict. But in a family, most people do love each other. Not always, but they do. And they have, we bump up against each other in a family a lot more, too. I shared a room with my sister, and we used to tape down the center of the room, and no one shall cross the room, because she was messy and I wasn't, and that became a conflict for us. So I think the natural behavior, you were talking about conflict avoidance too. I think how that happens is often in families that are very authoritarian, where someone makes the decisions ahead of time, where a parent comes down on the children and says, no, this is the decision, this is what's going to happen. And then children don't really learn how to have conflict, and then it becomes scary, because something bad might happen if you have conflict either with your parent or your sibling or a friend, because it could be bad. So kids learn to be conflict avoidant, which, sometimes is a good thing, but a lot of times that means then you're not being yourself if you can't say what you're really believing. And in work, sometimes you can't. So filters are necessary. But in your home life, you learn how to express who you are, what you need, where you want to be.
Thanks. Quick word to our audience. If you have any questions and you're watching this on television live, you can go to boulderpsychologicalservices.com and submit your questions there. And for those members in our viewing audience, you are welcome to also just submit a question on a piece of paper, and we'd be happy to address that as well. Okay, so if I'm not going to avoid conflict, I'm still a little worried that conflict causes stress and can damage relationships. So where should I as a parent or other parents start if it's time to actually address it, if we need to lean in and try to reduce family conflict? Steve?
Well, there's a lot of different kinds of conflict. There can be conflict between, if you're the parent, two children. They could be siblings. If it's the holidays, it could be cousins or friends. It could be conflict between a child and an adult. It could be between two adults. And you as a parent or a family member might be a part of that conflict in it, or you might be a third party looking at it, trying to reduce it. But in any case, first thing I'd say to do is get to a calm place within yourself. If you can't get calm within yourself, whether you're watching two other people going at it or somebody's going at it with you, then you're not likely to be helpful. And if you need to remove yourself first, then do that. Take some time, whatever you need to calm yourself first. If it's conflict between, say, a child and a parent, or two children, a child's involved, and you yourself as an adult get worked up and out of sorts, then you're kind of becoming another child in this, and that doesn't help. Then you need a calm, mature adult, and you need to find that in yourself. And if you can't, then you need to remove yourself.
Great, thanks. Leslie?
Well, and then the issue of safety also comes up in conflict. So as the adult, my job is always to keep people safe, and that includes myself. And what Steve was saying is actually quite valuable in that I must remove myself if for any reason I'm out of control or I'm angry. It won't help to be angry in a conflict, because then it's hard to listen when you're angry. And as a parent, my job is to listen, to validate my children and let them know that I really get what's going on. So a conflict between myself and a child would be the same as a conflict between my two kids. I need to listen, figure out what's going on between both sides by giving feedback to them about what I'm hearing, and then the solutions. Once people are heard, I keep saying that, but once people are heard, the whole level of emotion drops. You can see it in their faces. You'll see their faces soften. And then is the time to do some problem solving about why. What's going on? How does it work? Why did this happen? And as a parent, you can get caught up in that a bit too much, too. I think sometimes you just need to let kids argue and deal with it themselves. But for me to walk in and end it and put my foot on it is not helpful to them in a learning process around how to manage conflict.
Okay. All right, I think I need some advice here, because when I'm watching two of my kids, sort of the sibling-to-sibling conflict, I'm mostly like, all right, we got to put an end to this conflict. But if I'm involved and it's me with one of my siblings, or not one of my siblings, me with one of my kids, then I feel like I'm much more into the content of the conflict than if I'm more of a sort of observer or peacekeeper of the kids. Any advice about how to handle these differently?
Can I speak to if it's two siblings? If
Yes,
it's two
please.
children, if you're a parent and you see two children, or they could be siblings or any two children involved, I think it's very important not to resist the temptation to sit yourself up as the judge. That you're going to be, they will tend to come to you complaining about what the other child did, wanting you as the adult to go, let's see. I've listened to you, I've listened to the other one. This one's the good one, and that one's the bad. Be the judge of who's right and wrong and who's good and bad. Instead, it's much more productive, particularly with younger children, to be able to put them in conversation with each other so that they can, as Leslie's pointing out, so they can hear each other. And if you can help facilitate them to hear each other and help them to suggest, ask them, invite them, well, how could you two work this out? Rather than they come to you to be the judge and the decision maker about what's now going to happen. Often the children can, when they hear each other, they can come up with their own solutions. And it's much more powerful, and it's much better for everyone. And it takes you out of the role, because they will tell you one story and you weren't there often. You didn't see it, but yet you hear a compelling story from one child and you jump on their side and start in on the other child for being bad, but then it's often you don't really have all the facts.
Can I be the judge and decision maker if I'm one of the people involved?
It's very difficult. I was hoping Leslie would speak to that. That's part of the problem.
If you're involved in it, you mean with your children?
Right.
That's right. That's very hard.
It is hard, because then we go back to Steve's mention about cooling down and recognizing that you're the adult. It's hard to be the adult sometimes. I have to admit that I'm not always thrilled. I love to throw a tantrum every now and then, and have. I must admit. But, I think about times when I've walked in the room and just picked up the toy and said, then nobody will have it. And I think most parents have done that at some time. But is that really teaching a child how to make a decision? What Steve was talking about is listening to the interests of both sides. It's really a mediation. As a parent, you're sitting there mediating between your kids about what it is that the problem is. And, sometimes they can come up with a solution. I've even heard kids offer solutions. But if they don't offer it, then you elicit it, ask for it. Invite, as Steve said. Invite them to give you a decision about what could be a better way to handle this.
Nice. Steve.
Can I offer a couple of more thoughts about if you are in the conflict?
Please.
First of all, I'd suggest it's very difficult to do, especially when you're in the heat of your own passion. You have to get calm and then try to question all of your own assumptions about what has happened, about what people's intentions are. We lead ourselves very far astray by assuming that other people intend things that most of the time our assumptions are not accurate about that, especially when we're in a conflict with them. So let go of your assumptions and also let go of your attachment to any particular outcome. But of course, if you're in the middle of it, you have a stake in it, that's very hard to do. But a few general rules would be, I would relentlessly try to banish sarcasm, snide remarks, rhetorical questions. Well, that kind of tone in your voice, this breaks down what Leslie pointed out earlier, the ability of people to hear each other. And if you're in it, you want to be heard. If you use these kinds of ways of speaking, sarcasm, snide remarks, you won't be heard, and nothing productive will happen. So I say to people, pretend that you're being graded for your civility, and the person who is the most civil and the most mature will win. Not the one who is correct or has the most reasonable position or was the most hard done by. These are just ways to try to get you to shift the way you're communicating with people.
Nice. Leslie.
And then I want to go back to the idea of this. This is all set up when children are very young, where the expectation is that these problems get solved, and that from the very beginning you sit down with a child and you work on these things when they're very young. My grandson actually just got in trouble at school for hitting a kid. And the issue was about another child stealing his toys about 4 times that day. So he got mad and hit this kid. So my daughter is a school teacher, so she went in and asked what had happened, not just to her son, but to 2 other children who were in the room, and found out much more information by doing that. So it's interesting when children are put on the mark, and unfortunately they do lie. And I've had many parents come in and talk about lying as such a difficult thing. But if the expectation is early on that there is not going to be conflict between you and your child about telling the truth about a situation, it's not going to be horrible, that it's not going to be dreaded to be honest and tell the truth, then I think you set up a standard for the rest of your child's life with you that this is how it works. So expectations start in the cradle, that I will be there for you, I will listen to you, and I will help you find an answer. I will not give you the answer. And we're also, as parents, we want to give kids the answer because it's so scary not to be in control.
Boy, I can see myself saying to my kids, really? Really? You're fighting about this again? And I hope I can take all this in, because I feel like when I'm off my game, I'm thinking that the conflict is more of an interruption, or it's frustrating, or it's like an indication of failure. But I keep hearing from you guys that these are opportunities, they're teachable moments for our kids, and it's really something wonderful to be able to help them learn how to manage this stuff, because it's out there in everyday life.
The hard part, Dan and Steve, is that we didn't always grow up in families where this happened. So the rules were not, I didn't learn this as a, early mom. These are things I had to learn as I went along. I wish I had grown up in a family where conflict was okay, but it wasn't, that we had the Lord and Master who told us what the answer would be. So
Where's the line with kids? Should we be shielding them from conflict between parents or other adults in the extended family? And if so, to what degree? Steve?
I think it depends on how high and how persistent the conflicts are in a family. And I also think it depends on how the adults are dealing with them. If the adults are dealing with them in a mature and productive way, I don't think that children should be shielded from that. I think they can learn. They can learn from that. It really depends, I guess, on how the adults are modeling. If the adults are behaving like babies, that's not a good model for children to see. If the adults are behaving as really responsible, mature adults, I don't think children, they don't need to be shielded from that, and they might very well benefit from being at least witness to it. Oh, wow, look at how my parents, or look at how my mom dealt with my brother on that. That worked out pretty well. Mom was pretty cool about that. So it sort of depends on how it's being dealt with.
Thanks. Okay.
I think the biggest issue is to shield children from destructive conflict, and it can become destructive both emotionally and physically. So if parents and or even siblings or an older child and a dad, I've seen it happen so many times, or a mom, those children need to be removed from the room if the conflict between anyone in the family becomes destructive, either physically or emotionally. So that goes back to what I said earlier about my job as a mom is to keep my children safe. So safety is the key to that. As long as it's safe, conflict is not horrible. But when it becomes destructive, it's horrible. And children grow up afraid of conflict, and they grow up unable to really manage how to be in a conflict because they're so afraid it's going to turn south and turn into that very scary, destructive thing they witnessed as a child.
Thanks. So how do we approach it differently with younger kids who are maybe, preschool age, elementary school, even younger, and then all the way up to adolescents who are really thinking in a much more complex, abstract way? Is there some age-appropriate strategies that we can use?
Well, I've sort of hinted to the idea or talked about over and over again about this business of empathy. Empathy from a parent to a child is crucial to constructing attachment. And within the attachment is the power of a parent. A child will want to please a parent to whom he is attached and will trust and value that parent to whom they are attached. So an example would be, I think I've said this earlier, but if you see two little 3-year-olds fighting, you go over and you say, "You guys are fighting over this toy." It sounds rhetorical and silly, but what you're doing is just expressing the fact that you see what's happening. That tells a child you're actually paying attention, as opposed to me over there making cookies while they're over there fighting and I'm screaming from the kitchen to stop it. Quit it. So I walk over and I say, "You guys are fighting over these toys." Oh, somebody's really frustrated. That's 2- and 3-year-olds. So now you have a 10-year-old comes home and he's been bullied at school, and he comes in and he's not talking, but you can tell by the cloud in his little face that he's had a really rough day. So I'm going to say, "You look like you've had a really rough day." Now again, not continuing to play my video game, which I've lately gotten hooked on while they're talking to me. It's that I actually stop, look them in the eyes, sometimes even grab their face so their eyes are looking in my eyes, and they get it that I get it. That is age appropriate. Teenagers, same thing. Recently I was working with a teen girl who was struggling with a friend, and the mom was struggling with giving this empathy because she felt like she needed to be in control. Her fear drove her to become controlling rather than empathetic. So it took some instruction around, this girl means a lot to you. She is so important to you as a friend, and yet it's troublesome when you guys have problems together or you get in trouble together. That's very different than, "You're never going to see that girl again. She causes nothing but trouble." So it's about empathy. It's about listening and being an empathetic parent.
Thanks.
That kind covers it all for me. That's
Cool. I got a good question that I want to send your way, Steve, which is more about the holidays. You mentioned that the holidays are coming, and a lot of times, frankly, I get a little worried when the holidays are coming because we're spending more time than normal with our family, and then there's also extended family that are coming into the mix, and that can complexify situations that were already complicated. So, any advice for us in the holiday season?
Yes. There are other places you can get this advice. You can go to websites of like the APA, the American Psychological Association has some tips and stuff. But very quickly, take time out for yourself. Loosen your belief that things have to be a certain way. I say Murphy's Law applies, meaning if something can go wrong, it will. And the more relaxed and flexible you can be with that, taking things in stride, the better. I think that holidays are the time I tell people that we tend to suffer during holidays, either the presence of family or the absence of family. Family brings a lot of stresses, things that maybe not for all of us, but for most of us. I think we tend to create a lot of problems from what I call it the gap. And by the gap, I mean the gap between the way things are and the way things we would like them to be. We tend to approach the holidays with an image of the Norman Rockwell family painting, or we have our own version of that. And then we get into trouble because things aren't working out the way we'd like. So it's useful to let go of your desire to control people and events. Let things go the way they need to go. Lower your expectations. There's really nothing that particularly must happen. I would also say that holidays are not, extended family comes, that's not the time to be airing out old grievances or resolving old problems between anyone in the extended family. It's a time to take a break and relax, and if that kind of stuff comes up, just defer it to, this is the holidays. We can sort all that out next year after the holidays. Also, it's very important to monitor and limit people's use of alcohol because that can, I'll leave it at that. Pay close attention to how much alcohol people are drinking. And the last thing I would say is two more things. It's useful to find humor. It's very useful to find humor. Put on a funny movie. There are plenty of good children's movies that are extremely funny for adults. And when things start getting tense in the extended family, find some humor. Don't find humor at people in the room. Don't try to make jokes about somebody who's upset with somebody or starting to get worked up. That humor, I'm going to watch this movie now. Hey, come watch this movie. That kind of thing. And the last thing is self-care. Take a walk, get a massage, whatever it is that is good care for you. Read a new book, whatever that is. Go exercise. People do different things. Some people self-care is to cook or pay attention to that. And don't overstress yourself by overspending. Families can spend more than they want because they want to get things, and then people have an underlying sort of a very subtle underlying level of stress because they're already thinking about how am I going to pay that bill when it comes in next month. Don't spend too much. Anyway.
Leslie?
Well, I was listening to the expectations. That's a huge thing in general. And this goes around what we expect in our lives, period. I think when expectations don't match up to reality, therein lies depression for most people. But what I was going to say is the holidays are a lot like raising a teenager, and that means I like the metaphor of a surfboard. If you straighten up your legs on a surfboard, you'll probably fall off or get knocked off, so keep your knees loose, which goes back to flexibility and the ability to be flexible. That's the general idea with raising kids, having holiday dinners, maybe even do a different dish for the dinner rather than the same old one, just to throw a little something in the mix so it's not always the same.
Nice. Boy, there's so many more questions I want to ask you guys, but we've only got time for one more. So this is it. What resources should families be considering if a conflict is getting escalated, it's potentially getting explosive, but it's beyond their ability to manage? Where should they look for support?
It kind of depends on the conflict, but I'm going to talk about the safety issue. So if a conflict becomes dangerous, the best resource is 911. And I have witnessed many parents being afraid to do that because they don't want to involve their child in the legal system. And I understand that, but in the end, safety is the main thing, not only for you and maybe other people in the home, but for this child. They need to understand that there is a bottom line about what can happen in your home. And tearing down doors or punching holes in walls or pulling out a knife, that has happened before. That is beyond what a parent can manage, and 911 is where to go. Now, what happens when the police come is you'll be asked whether or not you're willing to press charges against your child for destroying your house. And that's a decision many parents struggle with. Other than that, if a child is out of control in a way that's scary to you, and that by that I mean they're very odd, something's different, it's not normal, and you can get them in the car, you can take them to the local emergency room for help of a psychiatric nature. So those are your two bottom line resources. Beyond that, of course, is referring to Google therapists with the troubles that you're having, and usually you can find one. Psychology Today has lists of therapists. Boulder Psychological Services has a beautiful website with about 25 different therapists that you could access, myself being included and Dan as well, for these kinds of issues. So therapy is a nice way to bring families together over something that's really difficult. And a third party can sometimes help sort out, as I said, those knots that happen in every family situation.
Thanks. Steve, anything there?
I have very little to add to that. I would just say physical safety is more important than hurt feelings or pride.
Yep.
That has to come first. And again, speaking more to the holidays or extended family, and you have uncles or who knows what, extended family getting into it, sometimes it's enough to just simply separate the parties. Be creative. Send someone out on an errand. Oh, go send them for groceries that you already have, but let them go get some groceries. That's a good thing to do. Separate the people. And if someone is belligerent and won't stop, I just want to, agree that if they won't calm down and they won't leave, then you need to call the 911. I guess that's about the.
Great.
Yeah.
Boy, we're all wrapped up. Thank you guys so much for supporting this talk on family conflict and how to reduce it. I hope this helps all of our viewing audience in terms of your holidays and your experience with your families. If you are interested in following up on more talks in the new year, Boulder Psychological Services has webinars, library talks, and additional TV talks all resuming in January. You can find those details on www.boulderpsychologicalservices.com. Happy holidays, everyone.
And now the planet's done its bowing down, and soon the growth returns to follow ground. But I know what's churning underneath the snow, and I love my baby, and we've miles to go. Hey, 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 I'm okay. Be with me. We'll beat this, can't you see? So wait a while, winter time.